What is going on? My name is Tristan, and this is Lights Out Latest. I am joined by my fellow Formula One friends, Marina and Jason, ready to talk about everything Formula One. Let's jump right into it, recap the weekend we just had in Japan. I think one of the most interesting things to first talk about, Marina, you mentioned it earlier, Sebastian Vettel was there, and he had a fun little project for everyone on the grid to take part in.
He really did. We talked about it last week. We said, well, he's talked about having a surprise. He's going to be in Japan. Let's do something. We even joked about him potentially being on the track, like taking Stroll's place because Stroll didn't take part in last week's race. But indeed, his surprise was Bees Corner. At turn 2, he set up some habitats for biodiversity for some bees and other insects, and the drivers went down and painted it. Which had a really fun time. Carlos Sainz was even late. And it was just a fun activity. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I didn't see it till this morning. They took a bus up to turn 2 instead of walking down there. And Seb is explaining what they're going to do and what's going on. And it was like a school teacher on a school bus explaining to kids, and Max is sitting there like da 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 da, it was so funny.
That's what it felt like. I was seeing that content early in the week. I saw them. Obviously, all the drivers got to kind of customize their own bee key and everything. Seb was hopping around literally like they were on a school field trip. He was like, "Oh, this is what the bees are gonna do. Credit where credit's due. Everyone was super involved. Everyone seemed like they had a great
everybody really
time.
loved it.
Yeah, 100%.
Everybody
It's
seemed
awesome
to really,
see
really like
a
it.
historic figure like Seb Vettel, 4-time champion, coming in and doing all these other things. Like he's doing Race Without a Trace with renewable fuels and the beekeeping event. So it's really cool to see him still want to be involved.
100%. I wish that him being involved, no offense to the bees, was more like him taking Helmut Marko's spot and doing junior development or something for Red Bull, because I really think that it would be so nice to get him back involved, but I also think that Ferrari really need it. So if Ferrari want to have him, it's okay. I feel for you,
Vettel
Jason.
Returned to Ferrari.
Vettel
so he could win
to Ferrari.
something with them.
Yeah,
You got conflicting interests.
A couple times so close, but no, I wish.
All right, well,
see.
let's dive into the weekend. Qualifying was first. Logan Sargent had a big crash out of turn 18 onto the main straight during Q1, which did cause a red flag and caught a lot of people out who weren't able to get their laps done. And Q2 was really normal. It was a typical qualifying session, but one crucial thing was that Max and the two McLarens did not do a second run. They stayed in the pits, which meant they had an extra set of tires for Q3, which proved to be very handy because Max took pole and the two McLarens followed him. Oscar Piastri on the front row of the grid and Lando Norris in P3, followed by Leclerc, then Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Tsunoda, Alonso, and so on. One thing I did think was funny, it was a cute message, was that apparently GP and Max had a little bet going where GP was like, you gotta get a 128, and Max is like, don't worry about it, I'm gonna full send. And GP goes, just don't shunt the car. And Max goes on the radio after he does his qualifying lap a 128.87, and then he goes, there's your 128, which I thought was really funny. It's a typical Max. I mean,
Love to see the Red Bull guys having fun. I mean, obviously, they had a rough weekend last week, or in general, but they started strong this week, qualifying practice regardless. They stayed on pole the whole race, stuff like that. So even to see them in qualifying with confidence
Checo
still.
was a little, I don't know.
Well,
he wasn't really
I didn't get there yet. I don't want to spoil that egg yet.
Ferraris beat him.
I don't know how much we can hold off on the Checo stuff. I mean, Checo honestly has had poor weekend after poor weekend. Max took pole over Piastri by 0.6 seconds, but there was points during the weekend where Max was over 2 seconds faster than Perez. I mean, it's ridiculous, and at the same time, there's also there was in sector 1, there was a particular corner where they were showing the graphics. Max was pulling 5.5 Gs into that corner, where everybody else was pulling not even 3, including his own teammate in the same car, right? And it just shows how much confidence he has, because sector 1 in Suzuka is pure confidence, right? You have to either have it or you don't. And you can have the best car out there, like Checo does, but if you're not confident going into that corner, just goes to show.
Just like you
just
said,
the strength to do that. Having in the neck and your arms to hold the wheels straight, going through 5G, insane, like a fighter pilot.
Some people say these guys aren't athletes. Pathetic.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently racing isn't a sport. No.
Apparently.
But there was also like no impeding this weekend. They did implement again that minimum time limit, so that there was no, extreme slowing down at the end of the lap. It seemed to work. Is that something you guys think we should continue doing? Because, I mean, it worked some places, but they're also super lenient about it. Like, Leclerc broke it, and he was a little bit under the minimum, and there was no penalty at all or anything, so...
I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not for it. It's kind of one of those deals where I think we need to keep just like a consistent flow. Like keep it up, keep doing the same thing, and then if something like drastic is shown from that process of not working, then maybe we need to change it up a bit. But yeah, I did notice that no impeding. It was a good, solid qualifying sessions. Besides, obviously, Sargent's crash. One shout out I want to make is Yuki Tsunoda. P10 effort for sure. Obviously, didn't transfer that well into the race. He actually, I think he dropped to 11th on the start. But still, home Grand Prix for him, starting 9th. I mean, it's a good, solid effort, especially for what year he's had. I mean, obviously, we just learned this past week that him and Ricciardo are going to be the duo for next year in that AlphaTauri camp, which is, such likable guys. Everyone likes Ricciardo, but obviously, you heard me last week speaking for Lawson, loving him, thinking he was doing a good job.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
Yeah, that was my one shout out from the qualifying effort. I was very impressed with Yuki for sure.
100%. I was impressed by both AlphaTauris, actually. I think that there was a little bit of pressure off all of them. Even Lawson, who doesn't have a seat, he wasn't fighting for a seat particularly. There's a chance he could get in that Williams, but he wasn't fighting for much. And so I felt like he really could relax. He's not going to be in a Red Bull seat, so I felt like he also thought, well, if I accidentally crash into my teammate or something, it's fine, no biggie. So he really went for it. They were having a really good battle. If we go down to the race now, they were having a really good battle into the first couple turns throughout the first sector before the safety car came out. But Lawson did get the better of Tsunoda and ended up finishing the race 11th, just ahead of Tsunoda. And I think AlphaTauri's finishing 11th and 12th just outside the points is like the story of their season. It's happened like almost every race. And I feel bad for them at this point. They get a point here and there. I think they have 5 points in the constructors. But they keep just getting right close to the points and not being able to break through.
That's absolutely true.
That consistency will pay off at some point. I mean, all the 11th places Tsunoda got. It's important to be consistent here because the second you're not, you're nobody. I feel like somebody like that was Grosjean, where on his day he could have put the Lotus years ago, the Lotus on pole position, and he had 10 podiums, but just as an IndyCar, he lost his seat for next year, and it's because, he would either be on the podium or in the wall. And it's a lot better to see that AlphaTauri's drivers got it pretty consistent.
Especially because AlphaTauri is potentially going to be very much closer to Red Bull next year. Them taking all the potential parts, all the parts that can be shared, all the engine stuff, everything's going over to the sister team, and they're going to take more ownership over that team, rather than it just being kind of a sister team that we can call on when we need someone to, not show up for an impeding trial at the stewards. So hopefully that consistency for Yuki and fingers crossed consistency with Daniel will help them out. One person who has been ultra consistent this year, Max Verstappen, winning yet again. Is that what, 13 this year?
I don't know, Marino. Is it?
Three.
All but 3. His teammate winning the other 2 this season, and the Carlos Sainz winning the only non-Red Bull. I love it, Jason. The only non-Red Bull victory this year. He took home 26 points, 25 for the win, and 1 for the fastest lap, of course. There was a funny radio message after the race as well where GP was like, it was only 7/10, and he was like, yeah, I was trying really hard on that last lap to get the fastest lap. Because he only took the fastest lap by 7/10 off the last fastest lap.
Oh my
which
God.
It was just such a Max thing. He seemed very, very ultra happy for the team. He was just in such high spirits after the race.
That team was ecstatic. Yeah, especially after, I understand we can get to it, but they secured the constructors. I mean, right after the broadcast ended of him crossing the line, that team they were losing it in the garage.
They were losing
excited for them.
100%. The 2 McLarens finished right alongside him on the podium. A double podium for McLaren, which is really refreshing. I love McLaren. I think, they've taken really big steps this year.
Great to see them back.
They take home 33 points as a team, 18 and 15.
Piastri, first podium.
And Norris jumps Russell in the constructors, as well as Piastri jumping Stroll and Gasly in the constructors with that P3 finish.
First rookie to be on the podium since, believe it or not, Lance Stroll 2017 in Baku.
No way.
Ah,
Yeah.
really? Wow.
That's
Before that,
crazy.
it was
Dang, I didn't even
Kevin
realize
Magnussen 2014 with McLaren.
Wow.
So
Wow.
another McLaren
That's
rookie
incredible.
podium.
Wow, yeah. Well, speaking of Lance Stroll, not a good race for him. He DNF'd, if I'm not mistaken.
He did DNF.
He did
Yep.
DNF, along with Alex Albon, Logan Sargent, Valtteri Bottas. Who else DNF'd in this race? Checo. Checo DNF'd twice in this race. If I would have told you at the beginning of the race that there was a double DNF by Red Bull, you would have been ecstatic. Little did you know it was both Checo.
That second DNF was important, though. Second
Only
one was a
Let's go
smart
into
move.
that, Jason. Jason, you want to explain to our listeners why that happened and how he can come out of the box after he had retired, essentially.
It's something Red Bull had to do to avoid a penalty for next race, because after that collision with Magnussen, race control gave Perez a 5-second penalty, and then he went and retired. So that would end up as a grid penalty next race, and to avoid that, Red Bull said, hey, let's just go out real quick, serve the penalty, and then retire again. So, we could write off this race and not the next one too.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
A quick fun fact and something that I'm sure you probably know, Jason, a lot of drivers used to do this in the 90s because essentially if you could go in, repair the car, and come back out and complete more laps than your fellow competitors who retired, then you could still get points. Because of the way the point system worked back then. So this was fairly common. A lot of people were like, this feels illegal. It definitely is legal. Red Bull checked it with race control. They were like, hey, I'm pretty sure this is in the rule book. We can do this, right? I definitely think there's a rule change coming on that because it felt illegal to fans, and I'm sure other teams were like, what the heck,
Very strange moment.
Very strange moment. My favorite camera shot as a Max Verstappen fan was Max boxing, and he comes out, and he's coming out in the lead still after pitting, and they just switch the camera over to Checo just sitting in the garage, like...
Yeah,
so
he's like
depressed.
just watching them go by. Like,
so depressed. He's just watching them go by.
bye-bye.
He's like, oh, there's my teammate winning the race, and I hear DNF'd for the second time. Yeah, there was definitely just a lot going on. Red Bull did secure the constructors without Checo, and my meme, Max Verstappen secures constructors championship, will be there forever. I feel like I need to just move to a different subject because I could talk about Max Verstappen being better than Sergio Perez all day long.
It's a real shame, though. It really is, because, again, you mentioned even just not a couple minutes ago, Checo winning 2 races this year, but still, it's almost been all right, we started here, and then it went like this, and it hasn't stopped going down. It's just
yeah.
That's why the questions of, I understand he has the seat locked for next year, but it's 2025, how are we going to pan this out? Is it going to be maybe next year Checo's going to really turn it around? I don't know. It's just this weekend, double DNF, it's all just an amalgamation of just all right, what are we doing?
100%.
he's running
I think
out of time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's even a chance he could still not have that seat locked down. I mean, he's been given so many opportunities, and I feel like he just has bad weekend after bad weekend. We're here every weekend talking about Max won the race, Checo's not even on the podium. And I feel like that's a disservice to that car that they have. And I understand that a lot of people are going to be like, Max has a better car, Max has the upgrades, yeah, but when you're performing, you get those upgrades, right? Even on a team like McLaren, for 2 races, I believe, Lando had the upgrades and Oscar didn't. I mean, it was the second upgrade, so granted the car was still pretty good, but we saw Lando on the podium and Oscar not. And chances are that's probably due to the upgrades, but as soon as he got the upgrades, he's up there again. And I just overall thought it was a really clumsy race from Checo. I mean, he hit Hamilton on the first turn, and then
oh my God. I couldn't believe the Magnussen. Yeah, I couldn't believe that.
It reminded me a lot of Singapore with Albon. I mean, it's the same thing. I get that you have a very fast car and you're eager to overtake, but those overtakes, you can do them in a much easier place when you have more speed. Going into turn 1, for example, is a prime place. Everybody got really, did their main overtakes in that corner. So I just thought it was clumsy from Checo. But another clumsy driver, sorry to interrupt you, Tristan. Clumsy driver was Bottas. And Logan Sargent, both hitting people. Logan hitting Valtteri Bottas, actually. Misspoke. Joe Guan Yu hit Alex Albon, which caused major damage into turn 1. That was why we had a safety car. Thoughts?
You know what was weird about that is, I don't know if you guys caught this during the broadcast, but they initially threw a safety car, and then they said the track was clear for green. They went back to green for like 5 seconds, and then they were coming back around. They were coming back around to the main straightaway, and then they threw the safety car out again. And I was like, okay, well, like, what is happening? I looked at turn 1. The amount of debris. They said there was no debris. It was clear for about like 10 seconds. It was a short little error, but I was like, what the hell? But yeah, no, it was It's just so I was even going to mention this if this wreck had not happened. We've had a lot of clean restarts or starts in general for many races in a row, and the fact that, I mean, granted it was about in the back half of the field, but still it was just like they went 3 wide for a second, and then they all got. It's just it screamed amateur to
Messy
me.
race.
I don't know. Messy race,
Messy. It screamed Formula 2 restart to me. I don't know if you guys watch Formula 2, but Azerbaijan, they took out like 7 cars in one turn on like the last lap of the race on a restart. So like it just screamed like amateur hour to me. We had like 5 DNFs in like the first couple of laps of the race. It was just crash after crash. There was also a lot of team orders in this race. And a lot of non-team orders where I felt like we're talking about team orders for all these other teams. There should definitely be team orders for this team. AlphaTauri were free to fight. Mercedes were free to fight to an extent until the very end of the race where they were told to invert the cars. But Russell was like, no, don't want to do that. Let's not do that. And Lewis was like, let me through them faster. And when they finally did, unfortunately, Sainz got the better of them because they were trying to do a Sainz. Sainz said they're trying to do what I did in Singapore and they're failing.
Yep.
And they definitely did. They weren't able to keep within DRS and pull each other along. The McLarens also inverted, but Oscar didn't get the memo and they ended up having to wait a little longer. And one thing that wasn't shown on the broadcast was the Alpines. The Alpines also inverted.
Horrible fight against each other too about that. Nobody was happy with how it turned out.
Do you want to tell the listeners what happened, Jason?
Yeah, it was, Ocon and Gasly, and the team's like, let Gasly through, and then Gasly didn't do anything, and then Ocon was like, oh, what am I doing now? And it didn't work out. Neither of them were faster. They were just as slow as each other were, and they got in each other's way. And as a team, you can't stop racers from racing, so it got pretty heated, and
that's true.
It was not a good situation for them.
They did both finish in the points, though, so not a terrible day as a whole. Even, I mean, Esteban actually was up 5 grid positions from where he started. He's actually my personal biggest winner of the day. I mean, he got up in the points. He's up in 9th, especially, and obviously, I think they might have been able to catch Alonso, maybe, but outside of that, they weren't catching the Mercedes, they weren't catching the Ferrari. So, an Alpine team did a really good job for what they were able to accomplish, I guess. But still, watching that live, the 2 toss-ups between the two is just it was funny. It was funny.
It reminds me of the days of Force India when Perez and Ocon would fight each other, like Spa 2017 and Baku 2017. Yeah, you had Perez and Ocon just, they crashed into each other, gave each other flat tires, gave each other wing damage. It was a bit heated, and you still see that with Ocon today. He's still just as competitive.
Oh, yeah.
I think one thing that helped Ocon a lot was the undercut. The undercut was really powerful here. Everyone who pitted early seemed to get boosted in both the timesheets, but also in track position. They, for the most part, they weren't vulnerable at the end of the race. Like Carlos Sainz, the Ferrari left him out thinking, okay, he's going to have fresher tires at the end, but he was not able to get back up to where he was. He lost a lot of time. So clearly that was really powerful here. It's not powerful at a lot of tracks, but here undercut seemed to work really well. And what I liked about this race was everybody pitted at different times. I felt like you never know who was going to be in the pits because it wasn't like that thing where everyone's in the pits in like the same 2 laps or whatever. They went at a lot of different tire strategies. There were a lot of 2 stops, but if I'm not mistaken, Russell did a 1 stop? I could be wrong. but I think he may have done a one stop.
Not entirely
Yeah, I
sure.
remember him asking for plan B during the race instead of plan A, and I guess that was the one stop, and he was able to tried to make it work. Obviously, he couldn't pull off what Sainz did, but he tried.
Yeah. I want to talk really quickly about Alonso because I know, Tristan, he's your favorite. He had a pretty decent race, but he was not happy that he pitted very early. They started him on softs, and he told the team, "You threw me to the lions. Figure it out. Tell me, what do I do?"
First time I heard him angry this year.
Yeah,
he's been so happy at this team.
He's been so happy. Yeah. He's been at the beginning of the year. He was watching the TVs and telling Lance to use this setup, and now he's like, "What the hell are you doing? Help me! Like, what did you do?" Not very happy. The team also spoke out over the weekend saying that last week we discussed big driver error from him, just not a good race for him. But it wasn't actually his fault. He did have damage from lap 2 onwards. So I guess not a bad string of
I did read
events
into
for
that.
him.
Yeah, I remember reading that article because again last week we talked about how just not great of a race it was in general. So that eased the soul a little bit. But at the same time, I heard about the pit strategy and what they called him in on, and it was like Jason said. Honestly, it was actually the first time really I have heard him all year making a fuss about strategy or about management as a whole. So that not a bad day. 8th place, take it. But at the same time, you want your boy up in the top 3 at least. He's been doing it all year.
If you think about the very beginning of the year, I mean, Alonso was 3rd consistently. He was at that podium, even 2nd a couple times, once or twice. I don't remember how many times he was 2nd.
He's got a lot of podiums.
He's got a lot of podiums this year, and now for him to be 8th, McLaren, they were 17th and 18th. They did tire testing in Bahrain. They were testing a bunch of different front wings. I don't even know how many times I went to Bahrain. So I was sitting on the pit straight watching McLaren pit Lando Norris like 6 times. They just kept changing tires, changing wings. They used it as a test strategy, and now they're 2nd and 3rd, double podium for McLaren. It's just incredible, and the way the season has changed. It's not that one consistent factor has been Red Bull, and everybody else has really shifted, and everybody, there's that meme and stuff on TikTok where it's like, if you just cover up the first place, everything below it is super competitive. You never know who's going to be there.
Oh yeah.
McLaren got that new wind tunnel in place this year, and I think it's really helped them. They've said it's helped them. Andrea Stella, it's been great to see them climb the grid. I've barely seen, I think the first time in a while I've seen a team improve that much over the season. Other
Especially
than Ferrari,
this new cost
I'm a
cap
bit
era.
of a Haas fan, being an American, so I'm used to the opposite happening. They're really fast in Australia, and they get slower and slower and slower.
Yep.
But no, it's cool to see them back up there.
Yeah,
100%.
Haas definitely did take a dive. It's just their race pace. I mean, their qualifying pace is so nice. I mean, there's several times where they can get into Q2. I think Nico Hülkenberg has actually been in Q3 as well. But then their race pace just takes a dive. Those tires, they just cannot keep up with them.
Was it this year that Magnussen won pole at
Was last year at Brazil.
Last year in Brazil. Okay,
That
right.
was
Yeah,
incredible.
it was raining. Yeah. He did a mega lap. It was like the last one to get a lap in. And then it started raining, and did we have a red flag? I think we had a red flag for the rain. And then when we went back out, it was too wet, and nobody got a faster lap in, and he ended up taking. That was mega scenes.
Oh yeah,
it was crazy.
It was a nice heartfelt moment.
Let's talk a couple big breaking news that happened over this past weekend and before. Oscar Piastri signed an extension with McLaren. He'll be there till 2026. I think it's really important for them to just have a secure driver lineup, know that their drivers aren't going anywhere, hopefully. You never know what could happen. F1 is a crazy place.
100%.
Daniel was supposed to be there this year, and he's driving an AlphaTauri, so there can still be big changes, but in theory, they should be good and set till at least 2026.
It's nice to have that contract in ink, even if it can change. I don't know. Again, I'm not a driver, but at the same time, if I was told by my boss, "Hey, you have a year to prove yourself. Next year, we don't know what you're gonna do," or I'd say, "Oh, here's your contract. You're here till 2026. You have time." It's got to be relaxing almost. Next year you're locked in, the year after that, and the year after that. And again, things can change, but just knowing comfortability-wise for Piastri, I think that's a great deal. I think it's an awesome deal, 100%.
It helps a lot. I remember Bottas said he always had 1-year contracts with Mercedes, and that high-pressure environment of year after year having to prove himself. he said it did not help him, and going to Alfa Romeo, getting a multi-year contract, that's really what he wanted. That's why Alonso didn't stay at Alpine for next year. Well, one of the reasons is Alpine were prepared to only give him 1 year. Aston gave him many years, and now we're here. He's got a number of podiums, and it helps a lot.
100%.
I think a lot of those teams, especially Alpine and Alpha, locking down an older vet as well. I mean, obviously, actually, you can almost even tell with Bottas. He seems so much more relaxed on the grid. I understand he hasn't been performing that well.
The style.
Yeah. The bullet, dude, it's awesome. Absolutely.
He's relaxed.
You see him enjoying himself. Everybody's chilling.
And you want to see these guys having a good time, but also you do want to see them performing. I think end all be all. Not that they're in the waning years of their careers, but those teams locking down older guns like that to help train their younger guys, even better. Lock them down for a couple years. Get like Zhou, get like Pierre, like any of these younger guys. It's a great voice to have in the garage, regardless. So
100%, and that's exactly what AlphaTauri is trying to do. They also released their driver lineup for next year. It will be Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda. AlphaTauri team principal, I think I mentioned this last week. They really wanted someone who's super experienced. Just in that one weekend that Daniel Ricciardo was in the car, or 2 weekends? 2. He was right on it with the setup. He was very helpful in giving very detailed feedback to the team. This is what we need to fix. And I think he'll be really useful for Yuki Tsunoda to learn a lot. Yuki learned a lot from Pierre, and then Pierre went to Alpine, so I think now it'll be nice for him to have another mentor. As much as I would have loved to see Lawson on the grid, and there is still a chance, so we'll see what happens with Logan.
We shall
As Americans, we really shouldn't have fingers crossed.
No, but
I think rumors Drugovich, former Formula 2 champion.
Yeah, you see. Though, like, even Albon, like, he's having not bad of a season. I mean, regardless, Williams
was electric in his rookie year until Red Bull. Then he just never got there with Red Bull.
It's tough to gauge Williams right now. They're really a tough team to gauge because, like, there's not much consistency over there. There's not a lot of speed. So, obviously, we want to root for Sargent. We want him to have that seat. Obviously, as an American or even as a fan, you want to see, like, diversity. But at the same time, it's like, would Lawson do a better job? Who knows? So we shall see. It's the last seat on the grid that needs to be locked down.
Would too.
So,
I think he would too. But I mean, Lawson is young. Logan is young. Whatever happens, I'm sure they'll do great. He's doing really great. Liam Lawson in I think it's Super Formula. Is that what he's racing?
Yep.
So he's doing super great in that. And whatever happens to Liam Lawson, I think for sure we'll see him on the grid at some point. You mentioned Felipe Drugovich, who is a Brazilian. Love my fellow Brazilians. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast. I am Brazilian, so I love Senna. I love Felipe Massa. I love Felipe Drugovich. I do think.
Do you forget about Bruno? Like Bruno Senna, not forget about him.
I didn't forget about him. I said Senna, last name.
Okay.
Not the first name.
Can't forget about Senna.
First Senna or second Senna?
Both Sennas.
Okay.
I love all Brazilians. I definitely didn't mention all of them because there's been a lot of them, but I love my Brazilians. I do think, though, that they're kind of in a tough spot, Brazilians, in terms of, the economy that we have, the sponsorships, because let's not forget, it's not all about what's performing on track. The teams need money, and, bringing money from, U.S. has their sponsorships that Williams has because of Logan Sargent is definitely helping them out in terms of money, and with James Vowles there as well to run the team well. I think that Logan will probably keep the seat. As much as we love Liam Lawson, I think Logan will probably keep it. Let's talk a little bit about the FIA, because the FIA has been very inconsistent usually. But they did mention this weekend in the driver's briefing that they did make a mistake with Max Verstappen's penalty in Singapore. We talked about this, saying that we thought potentially he did need or deserve a penalty for impeding Yuki Tsunoda, and the steward said indeed he did deserve a penalty. We just didn't give him one because we made an error. And I think that's it's good on their part for saying, we made a mistake and setting a precedent, but also,
it's too late.
It's too late. Like, the race is over, nothing's gonna change, right? So what's the point in putting it out there and being like, we made a mistake,
Gunther Steiner spoke a number of times on the inconsistency, because the stewards that hand out the penalties are different every weekend. There's a few random ones, few scheduled ones. I think every team gets to pick at least one. They're usually former drivers or other motorsport experienced people dishing out the penalties for the weekend under one race director, which is always the same, but the director doesn't decide the penalties, the stewards do. So it's not like, well, not in the NFL or in other leagues where there's different umpires every game. It's kind of the same here. There's different refs and stewards every game, every race.
See, but like, now that's where my novice knowledge comes in. I actually didn't know that. Obviously, you could, as you compared, like you have umpires, referees in the NFL, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, a fundamental penalty issue, it goes down to HQ. Like for the MLB, it goes up to New York. If there's a call that needs to be played on the field, a set crew, week by week, the same group of people, same voices, go by the same book, every play. I didn't know it changed week by week in Formula One. That's crazy.
It does. It does change week by week. And there's been a debate about this among commentators and among fans. Is that what we need? Is that going to help consistency, or is that only making it worse? Is if we have one set of stewards that travel to all the races, could that create bias? It could be like, oh, I'm a Max fan, I'm never going to give Max a penalty, or Lewis, or whatever. If we have different stewards every week, then I think the chances of not being biased is less. But at the same time, you're going to get that inconsistency because it's a different group of people with a different backgrounds and, different racing experience.
At first, I was on the side of same stewards every race, every time. But like you said, you get to know the drivers if you're there every weekend. You get to really get, there could be unconscious biases developing. So just like other sports, every single match, there's different referees. Every single game, there's different umpires. As long as they could stay consistent as humanly possible, I don't see the issue with having a rotating cast of stewards. It's just important to note that these aren't professional racing referees. Most of the time, they're former drivers, former team managers, former race engineers. These aren't people who are always officiating Formula One races. So that could be an area for change.
That's fair. It's a good point. That was a good point.
Fair, good point. Yeah. I know you put on our notes for this podcast, Jason, that there was some new rear wing stuff for McLaren and for Red Bull as well. I didn't catch that. So you want to?
So actually, we saw a lot of this last race. A lot of teams did bring it in. We saw a mix this race, but in the back of the rear wing, instead of being a smooth curve downwards into end plates, there's been little triangle cutouts on the top plane of the wing. So you have the lower one and the upper one with the DRS. That upper one didn't connect completely with the end plates on the sides. So just another way to open up a little gap in the back, allow a little more vortices and aero efficiency. Just interesting to see how teams are able to look deeper into the rule book and say, hey, we can actually, cut this little piece of wing off. And, cool to see some of these innovations here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. It's up to interpretation, that rule book. So I'm sure, who knows,
it
maybe
definitely is.
We'll see if that's something. We'll see if that's something that maybe FIA is going to look at and be like, oh, I don't know. We'll have to take a look at that. But at the same time, that's very interesting. Technology.
100%. 100%. Speaking of innovation, one of the things we want to talk about this week is possible new tracks. Tristan, do you want to talk about that? I know that's something you're very passionate about, especially being an IndyCar and NASCAR fan. Some other tracks that we could look at.
Also being a geographic nerd, I love the world. I think everything around the world has a different culture to offer, and obviously introducing F1 to different places is a great idea. So I had a little intrigue thinking about Japan. I was like, all right, we're at Suzuka, but I know a couple tracks in Japan. We got Fuji, we have Twin Ring Motegi, which actually NASCAR raced at in the 90s, so if you guys want to do a little research on that.
Oh, wow.
But so I had a couple ideas for tracks. I mean, as we know, Formula One goes not just to a racetrack and go to a city, like how we're going to Vegas in a couple weeks. Actually, is Vegas next week? No.
No, we have a month.
Okay, I got you.
Something like that. Yeah.
But so instead of Vegas, I was thinking about changing it up for America. And again, like you said, being a NASCAR fan, I was thinking maybe they could go to Sonoma. Now, Marina, I understand you've not heard of Sonoma. I'm not sure if Jason has, but Sonoma is right in wine country. It's in the middle of California. It's a beautiful racetrack. NASCAR's been there since the 80s. Gorgeous place. But on the more interesting side, and I think it's actually more applicable, especially to the worldwide audience of Formula One, I think we got to go back to Buenos Aires. Bring it back to Argentina. Bring a second race to South America. That audience needs a second race in general. I mean, Brazil is it's an amazing time. Again, Marina, you were there this year, correct?
I was not at the race, but I was in Brazil
okay.
visiting family this
Gotcha.
year. I went to Bahrain this year, and I will be at Austin, so hopefully we can get some coverage of that and maybe talk to some people at the race for the podcast, and you guys might be able to see that on our social medias later on.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would love to be in Argentina.
Yeah, I was going to say, Buenos Aires would be cool. Again, last time they were there was 1998 at the Autodrome, or I don't want to say it wrong, but that's the American or the westernized name for the track. But yeah, that was my main pull. I think Buenos Aires would be a great idea, great addition. I don't know if you guys have any ideas.
I heard IndyCar was actually considering going a race in Argentina. Augustin Canapino, brand new Argentinian driver to IndyCar. He's had a huge pull, huge fan base. For the Indy 500, he actually ran his car with the Argentine national team in honor of them winning the World Cup. So to see the blue and white stripes on that car,
I didn't notice that.
He's already built a very strong fan base, and they're considering some more races on North and South America. So maybe we see a Argentine, open wheel race pretty soon.
Absolutely,
but it'll be IndyCar before F1.
I would love to go back to Portugal. We had a race in Portugal a couple years ago during Portimao. That's an awesome track. I think F1 should definitely go back
corners,
there.
All the high speed.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know Le Mans Series and World Endurance Championship, they do some stuff there, but yeah, pretty awesome.
It's 100%. I also think Max Verstappen has been pulling a lot for South Africa. I think that'd be really cool. We don't have any races in Africa, so that's a continent that's kind of untouched for F1 right now, and I definitely think there's a huge fan base there. So we should. I think that'd be a cool place to go as well.
100%. Gorgeous country as well.
Before we end off, we have one last thing. Let's do our predictions for Qatar. I now. Is 2 weeks away and not next weekend, which is kind of heartbreaking. I love my race weekends, but it is a 57 lap race, 5.418 kilometer circuit, and the lap distance, the race distance is 308.826 kilometers. Now, this is very specific to F1. And I'm pretty sure you guys probably both know this, but I don't know if our fans do. Why is it 308? Why is the distance? I mean, it's not that particular number, but 300 plus.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know. I know you just said that I might know, but I swear I do not.
You might know. So the race distance, the minimum race distance is 300 kilometers, but it's always 300 kilometers plus one lap. So if we did 55 laps, that would be just under 300. And we'd hit 300 kilometers on lap 57, which is why we have 57 laps and 308 kilometers. There is no lap record in Qatar, funny or not. I was looking this up yesterday. There's no lap record.
Didn't they modify the track a little?
They did. That is why.
The other year?
So we were there in 2021. F1 was there in 2021. Not there last year. We didn't race in Qatar last year. We will race there in 2 weeks' time with a new track layout. So what are your predictions for podium, dark horse? Who's your underachiever of the weekend?
You first, Jason. I want to hear the Ferrari man speak.
Yeah. Well, it's too easy to say Max is the favorite to win, but he is the favorite to win. I don't see McLaren falling back. Mercedes and Ferrari were pretty close this weekend at times, but it seems like both of them. I feel like Qatar is another track that has a lot of high speed and tighter corners. Definitely not like Singapore, definitely more straights and sharp corners. So I see it pretty similar to Suzuka. Just, the McLarens are going to be quick, and Ferrari, Mercedes probably won't find anything. My dark horse for the weekend is going to be Albon. I think he can come back. I think Williams might find something, like they did in Zandvoort. They thought they were going to be slow in Zandvoort, and they were super quick. So I'm betting Albon might have a standout.
I'm loving it. I want Albon as well.
Albon would be nice, yeah. Well, if I'm going to have to go for a top three, again, it's a very high-speed track. I have a lot of confidence, obviously, in Max Verstappen taking the win. I think a lot of people are going to agree with that opinion, as we have mentioned many a times already. But I I am feeling a redemption arc from Checo this weekend. I'm not thinking he's going to score second, but I think the podium's going to go. We're going to go for Verstappen P1, Norris P2, Checo P3. I'm hoping, not just for not an ego boost or anything like that, for a confidence boost for him. I'm hoping he can get back on that podium. And then a nice dark horse pick. I understand it's weird to put Lewis Hamilton as a dark horse pick, but in general, I think we could see him back on the podium. But that would be the battle for me. Checo and Lewis. If one of those two guys, it's for some reason that's my flip-flop. It's either going to be 3-4, 3-4, you know? That's my pull. I mean, I would like to see, honestly, I used to hate Lewis as I just don't love dominance in the sport. So seeing him win all those championships, all those races, but now I'm starting to be like, all right, come on, old dog, get up there, get on that board.
You're telling me.
Listen,
poor Jason or poor Ferrari hearts. I'm gonna go Max, Lando, Charles. I think Ferrari's gonna have a good weekend. I think it's kind of hopefully redemption time for them and for Jason too. Poor guy. You guys are so close. I feel like you're so close every weekend. They end up that P4 position, like right there. I did forget to mention this. Just right last thing on our podcast. Qatar is actually a sprint race. And they will have.
I'm excited for that.
If Max is on the podium in the sprint race, he will tie up the drivers' championship, making it, number one again 3 times in a row for Max. But Lewis is closing up on Checo in the drivers' championship. So that battle you're talking about for maybe P3 and 4 in Qatar
could be
battle
important.
for P2. He's like 40 something points away, 33 points away, something like that.
That's close enough.
He's not fair. He's not far. He's close enough, and I think he could definitely make it.
Oh yeah.
But thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. We had a lot of fun doing it, and we will see you guys next week after Qatar.
Adios.
Goodbye.
Bye guys.